As part of our 75th anniversary, we are incredibly fortunate to hear from an extraordinary author and thinker, Ben Fountain, who has generously donated his time to be here with us today. Ben's work has challenged and inspires readers worldwide, offering profound insight into society, justice, and the human experience. His novel, Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, became a cultural touchstone, and his commentary on democracy and civic life is more relevant now than ever. In recognition of his impact on Texas literature, Ben was named a finalist for the Dallas Morning News' 2024 Texan of the Year.
Ben's upcoming book, largely set in Dallas, is titled Rasputin Swims the Potomac and will be released next year in 2026. His insightful storytelling and profound exploration of societal themes have garnered numerous accolades, including the Penn Hemingway Award, the 2024 Joyce Carol Oates Prize, and the 2024 Thomas Wolfe Prize. His work continues to resonate with readers, offering deep reflections on the human condition and the complexities of our modern society.
Ben, we are so thrilled to have you back in Dallas today. Please join Nicole and I in welcoming our keynote speaker, Ben Fountain.
So Nicole and Ann are so glamorous and beautiful. I feel like I'm getting an Oscar when I came up here. And I'd also like to ask, if I do a good job today, can I get one of those lions? We can talk? Okay, all right. So friends, and we are all officially friends here today, thanks to the generosity of one of the fine people present here. I want you to know that your Dallas Public Library is a great public library. I had the great pleasure of taking a tour of the Central Branch yesterday, and I was expecting that I would be pleased, and it's always a work in progress up here. I knew I would be pleased by a lot of things that I would see, but I wasn't expecting to be gobsmacked by every single floor I visited. The quality of the special collections in the archives, the vast array of materials available to anyone and everyone, free of charge, who wants access to them, the crucial life and career services on offer, again available to anyone and everyone who wants them, the musical education program, which Nicole mentioned earlier, which features free lessons and some 400 instruments on loan, the warmth and brightness of the children's floor, the gorgeous displays, both interactive and static, giving deep dives into Dallas's history and the people who made that history. And all of this is being done with a shoestring staff that's constantly beset by severe budgetary constraints and lately intense political and legal pressure. Our Dallas librarians are miracle workers. And so I'm going to ask everyone here who is or has been an employee of the Dallas Public Library to please stand. These fine public servants are the glue that hold our community and society together. They work for the common good of all of us, rich or poor, old or young, whether we use the public library on a regular basis or not at all. These fine people serve in the most profound sense, and I think it's only fitting that, as you just did, you gave them a round of applause, which they absolutely deserve. The first librarian to be a real presence in my life was Mrs. Polly Ettinger, the librarian at Northwest Elementary School in Kinston, North Carolina. Mrs. Ettinger, a handsome woman of some 60 years of age, was old school. Excellent posture, precise in speech, her reading glasses at the ready on a lanyard around her neck. She was always immaculately dressed and groomed, often with a sweater draped across her shoulders, held in place by a silver chain and clasp. She ran a tight ship. Her library was not a place for nonsense, and more power to her for that. Everyone was a little bit scared of this formidable woman. But the two things that stand out most in my mind about Mrs. Ettinger, and for which I'll always be grateful to her, are these. The first is, on weekday mornings in the summer, she opened up the library for all the kids. You could walk over to the library and browse, read the magazines, see your friends, check out books. She didn't have to do it, and I'm sure no one was paying her to do it, and yet she did it out of what I feel safe in assuming was a powerful sense not only of service, but of taking deep pleasure in the service. The second thing I'm eternally grateful to Mrs. Ettinger for is this. She read to us. She read to us with no agenda other than to share the pure pleasure of reading. She didn't lay any comprehension test on us, or vocabulary drills, or morals to the story, or any other ostensibly useful stuff. There was nothing about buffing up our brains so we could all get into Harvard or Yale someday. Nothing about developing our communication skills to enhance our future marketability in the workforce. Just the reading was enough. It was plenty enough for everybody that we were allowed to be happy listening to her read. And we were happy, and that was enough to make us readers, no coercion necessary. I remember that during these years, my friends and I took turns checking out our favorite books. Among these, I recall The Baseball Life of Willie Mays, being a regular in the rotation, The Hardy Boys, We Were There at Pearl Harbor, Little League Heroes, and The Adventurous Life of Winston Churchill. And I very clearly recall, toward the end of sixth grade, coming upon a brand new biography of Ho Chi Minh on the shelf. The same Ho Chi Minh who was the leader of communist North Vietnam, against which the United States had just fought a prolonged and bloody war. So here in this elementary school library, in the heart of highly conservative eastern North Carolina, was a sober, scholarly, adult biography of our arch enemy, there for the reading. Did I read it? You better believe I did. And no, it didn't turn me into a communist. What it did do was broaden my awareness of the world and give me a deeper appreciation for the variety and complexity of human experience. And somehow both my psyche and the country survived. We can have discussions and even debates about what is appropriate to have in school libraries. Suitability of material according to age level, that's absolutely a primary consideration. I would not put Lolita in a grade school or middle school library, and probably not even a high school library, and that goes for a bunch of Norman Mailer novels as well. But generally speaking, that broad access to knowledge, this freedom to explore that I was privileged to have as a young person, this is, I would argue, absolutely central to the project of self-discovery that America has traditionally valued. The democratization of knowledge, we could call it, expanding the privilege of learning that for millennia was available only to the upper classes. But here in America, it became integral to the national project, this opening of the best thought and the highest art to anyone who wanted access to them. No institution has been more crucial to this project than the public library. And going back to Benjamin Franklin's founding of the Library Company of Philadelphia in 1731, you could say that no institution is truer to the American grain than the public library. So let's get the economic rationale out of the way right now. There's about 1 million studies showing, as Nicole and Ann pointed out earlier, there's about 1 million studies showing that public libraries are engines of economic growth, spending off something like $4.50 for every taxpayer dollar spent. But for the next couple of minutes, can we put aside this all-powerful measuring stick of our time and talk instead about human happiness, fulfillment, developing our talents and intellects to the fullest extent possible. And further to this, the role that developing our talents and intellects plays in creating a healthy democracy. 98 years ago, in a case called Whitney versus California, Justice Louis Brandeis of the U.S. Supreme Court had this to say, quote, "Those who won our independence believed that the final end of the state was to make men free to develop their faculties, and that in its government, the deliberative forces should prevail over the arbitrary. They valued liberty as both an end and as a means," end quote. Here, clearly stated, is democracy's premise, which is sort of breathtaking when you consider its fundamentally optimistic view of human nature. It's faith in the notion that over the long term, the collective wisdom of the majority will prove right more often than wrong. That given sufficient freedom and opportunity, your population will develop its talents, its intellect, its better judgment, and over time, its capacity for discernment and self-correction will be enlarged. Life is improved, liberty strengthened, and life is improved again. Liberty as both an end and as a means. And as a result of this virtuous cycle, the form of your union will be made more perfect, to borrow a famous phrase. And as for those who still favor the economic rationale, I'll give you some more economics. For much of its history, our country has invested lavishly in the education of its citizens, in public K through 12 education, in public libraries, in community colleges, in public university systems. We educated a great many people at great expense, offered them a near infinite array of fields of study in the liberal arts and beyond, and great freedom to choose among them, and by God, it made us rich. Dedicating tremendous resources to broadly disseminating knowledge and culture, to opening minds, to giving regular working people, in other words, all of us who would have been peasants and peons back in the old country, a realistic chance to develop our talents, our intellects, and our better judgment. By all the accepted metrics of wealth creation, this has proved to be a success of world historical proportions. Dallas, can I hear an amen? Can I hear an amen? Can I hear another amen? Very good. So given this record of stupendous success, history-altering success, why would we not lavish resources and support on our precious public library? In acknowledgement of the complexity of things, I can think of one reason why we might choose not to. And that's the quite large elephant in the room looming with us today, this elephant that's posing the question of why, in the age of digitization, the internet, smartphones and personal computers and all the rest, do we even need physical books anymore? And for that matter, is there still a need for, a purpose to, brick and mortar libraries? To answer this, we might first consider the recent history of the Texas energy grid. Many of you may remember that very cold week in February 4 years ago, when huge swaths of the grid went down in Dallas and across the state, and stayed down for days. And later we were told that the entire Texas grid came within minutes of total collapse. And had that happened, it would have been months before power was restored. It's sobering to think that all that digitized knowledge effectively vanishes if there's no functioning energy grid to support it. Bluntly stated, when the lights go out, all the digital stuff is gone. So I would put this forth as one rationale for material books in libraries. And I would offer as a second rationale the fact that some 30% of Dallas residents don't have internet in their homes. They depend on their local library for access to digital resources. It's crucial for them and for the rest of us as well. It's hard to imagine our society prospering over the long term when roughly a third of our population is deprived of this essential resource. Third, I think we need to consider the role that our libraries play as places of community for the flesh and blood, face-to-face human interaction that's essential to our well-being, and for which screens and chat rooms and social media are not only not a substitute, they may well increase a person's sense of loneliness and alienation. But ultimately, the case for physical books and libraries may come down to something quite basic about human nature and the nature of the physical vis-a-vis the digital. And more specifically, the nature of what we receive from a material book as compared to what we receive digitally through the screens that increasingly saturate our lives. The slow knowledge, we could call it, that comes from books versus the fast knowledge that's delivered via the internet. I'm not saying that physical books have a monopoly on truth as compared to the internet. Rather, what I'm saying is that physical books give us room to breathe. They allow us the time and space to be human, to absorb, process, reflect, think. Slow knowledge, the kind of knowledge that might even develop into a kind of wisdom given time and application. Whereas the delivery systems of the digital, our phones and computers, all those screens, they are very much compulsion machines. It's built into the wiring of these devices to goad and prod us onto the next thing. And if you're anything like me when you're online, you find yourself skimming and clicking, scrolling and skimming and clicking, bop, 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 bop. This is your brain as one of those super bouncy rubber balls. The internet is great for fast food knowledge, for information and facts, but for slow knowledge, deep knowledge, really trying to figure out the hardest stuff about our lives, this requires study. It requires patience. It requires thoughtfulness, curiosity, humility. And the physical book is still the best invention I know of for enabling us to do that difficult, essential work. And there's something else operating here that might be summed up in the adage, be curious, not judgmental. Apparently, like so many other people, I thought the phrase was coined by that most American of poets, Walt Whitman. But then I started poking around on the internet and discovered that it was actually Ted Lasso who said that. In any case, the point is well taken. Be curious, not judgmental, which is worth bearing in mind when we consider that a great deal of judgment happens online. And in fact, for the ultimate encaustic, cruel, vicious, knee-jerk, ignorant, bad faith, and mean-spirited judgment, it's hard to top the internet. But for our purposes, I'm thinking about the judgments that the internet, and more specifically, the almighty algorithm, is making about us, you and me, when we're online. All in the service of channeling us toward what might be broadly described as more of the same. It's the very nature of large systems of power and profit to try to limit our imagination of what is possible. That's how the power and the profits are maintained, by inducing us to think that there's no way other than this way, the present way. We're encouraged to limit our imaginations to the present facticity, and the algorithm is a tremendously powerful tool in this work of limiting. If we mean to be free, truly free in our minds, free to develop our faculties, our talents, our intellects to the fullest extent possible, in other words, to undertake that classic American journey of self-discovery, to, in the words of Justice Brandeis, value liberty both as an end and as a means, we need to declare our independence from the algorithm. This doesn't mean renouncing or abstaining from the internet, which no question is an incredibly useful thing in our lives. But we need to be mindful of both its uses and its limitations. We could put it this way: the internet can be a great servant, but it's a terrible master. Perhaps there's no simpler, more cost-efficient, more readily available means of achieving our independence than the physical books in our public library. I would argue that there's real agency in something as basic as taking a random walk through the stacks. That vagrant scholarship, as Rabbi Stern mentioned earlier, which I'm going to steal, by the way. But I'll always give you credit. Real agency in taking that random walk around the stacks and opening ourselves up to possibilities outside of the familiar, the comfortable, the self-reinforcing. There's no algorithm steering our feet this way or that, only our natural and quite wonderful human curiosity. Shutting off our devices and taking that random walk through the stacks, maybe real self-discovery, real agency, and a stronger democracy can start with something as small and simple as that. These days, we're subjected to nonstop offers to compromise our independence. There's the appeal of authoritarian politics and ideology and its invitation to outsource the hard work of thinking, that essential work of thinking in a democracy, to a strong man or a lockstep ideology, and hand in glove with this, to surrender our intellects to the mechanical workings of the algorithm. I expect quite a few of us are thinking about the state of our democracy these days. We all see what's going on. And as it pertains to the well-being of our public libraries and our democracy, a great deal of it is dangerous and destructive. Book bans, censorship, intimidation of librarians, growing hostility to educational and cultural institutions, and most recently, the current administration's move to eliminate the Institute of Museum and Library Services, the main federal agency for providing financial support to libraries across the country. As far as the politics of the current moment go and pertain to public libraries, much of it cuts as deeply against the American grain as one could imagine. That stalwart American grain that goes back 300 years to Benjamin Franklin and the Library Company of Philadelphia. Where the current politics is going to lead us, I don't know. But I do know that it's very much within our power to rally around our public library, just as other cities are rallying around theirs. Seattle, San Diego, Chicago, these are among the cities that are making a concerted effort to support and strengthen their public libraries. And I dare say it's within our power in Dallas to do the same. In fact, I might even be so gauche as to point out that there has never been more wealth in the city of Dallas than right now. There's never been more wealth in the state of Texas than right now. We can afford a strong, thriving public library system. We might even invert that formulation and say that we can't not afford to have a strong, thriving public library system. And as further incentive, it's worth pointing out, once again, how much bang you get for the buck when investing in your public library. $4.50 for every dollar invested. What money manager wouldn't take that rate of return? So, the Dallas Public Library was established by city ordinance in 1900. The Friends of the Dallas Public Library was established in 1950. Now we find ourselves in the year 2025, exactly 125 years after the library's founding and 75 years after the founding of the Friends of the Library. I have to confess, I perceive a really lovely symmetry in the way these numbers are lining up. And by extension, I can't think of a better, more symmetrically apt time to renew our support for the library. We owe it to ourselves to do it, just as we owe it to future generations, just as past generations in Dallas did it for us. So let this present generation step forward and keep a great thing going. It's in our power. All we have to do is do it. Thank you.